Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to explain how to solve pollution basically. So basically pollution is one legitimate concern that I think some environmentalists have. I think it's somewhat damaging to just waste materials and just throw them out on the streets. I think that's a very damaging thing. And when companies like pollute rivers or streams, all or just any part of the environment, I view that as a fairly negative thing. Now, I think some types of pollution are necessary ultimately for production. For example, like in the Industrial Revolution, all the pollution that came with development was very necessary because it was absolutely necessary to go through the kind of technological advancement that we did at the time and to still produce the amount of energy that people needed to survive and just to develop in that as much as we did. There had to be some sort of stepping stone to get to where we are now, where we had to pollute a lot. Like that's what you see in a lot of third world countries now, like where they're starting to industrialize, but they're polluting the environment quite a bit. I think that is absolutely necessary. However, I don't think pollution is entirely necessary in some economies like America. I don't think all the pollution that's happening is absolutely necessary. So the question is, how can we solve this? Well, the answer is, as you probably would expect if you know some of my beliefs, it's not government. The answer is not government regulation, because what government regulation does is it tells businesses what they can and cannot do, and ultimately stifles the human mind and hurts the creative process, hurts innovation, hurts the economy, and the economy is all of us, which is, yeah, you guys probably know my line of reasoning by now if you've watched any of my videos. But, so the solution is obviously not government regulation. So what is the proper solution? Well, so then let's look at the source of why things get polluted or why resources are overused. I guess along with pollution, overuse of resources is another big problem. So let's look to a common economic idea, I guess, is the tragedy of the commons. It's the idea when something is owned in common or publicly owned, people are a lot more willing to just exploit the land, overexploit the land, because if they don't exploit it, someone else is gonna, because it's owned by everybody, or pollute it because it's not something that they're actively profiting from. It's not something that they actively own. So they're more likely to pollute and exploit that land. So how do we solve this problem? Well, I think the answer is obvious. We need to find some way to privatize that land. Now, I don't have the specific answers on how you would privatize rivers and oceans and all that sort of stuff. However, I do know in principle that privatization, like a philosophical principle, that privatization prevents this tragedy of the commons, and it prevents things like pollution and exploitation, which I view as legitimate environmental concerns. Because when you own that land, you're not going to let people exploit your resources or pollute your land. Like, think about your house. You're not going to let people come and just take all your shit and like throw all their garbage at your house because it's your house. You don't want people abusing your property like that. So then I think the same thing could apply to if someone owned a river or the ocean or different parts of the ocean, or different land, even like public parks. I think public parks would be a lot better kept if they were owned privately, because you have a profit incentive to making them look nice and making them better. And I think private parks would still exist because people want to pay money to see this sort of stuff, and because they already do. Like, you have to get some sort of license to go into most public parks. But I think as a general principle, privatizing public lands, public things, is a very, very beneficial principle that should prevent pollution, prevent all those tragedy of the commons, all that sort of stuff, all the river all that sort of stuff. So I think ultimately that is the end. That is something that as a government we should strive to create a society more with more private land, since it ultimately prevents pollution. Now, as more of a political like philosopher, what I do, I don't need to think about like what specifically privatizing them would entail. My job is to argue basically privatization is the way to go. And this is something that people used to think about a lot more, like how specifically are we going to privatize these sort of things. But then the government became a lot more involved in our lives, and ultimately those sort of discussions stopped, as people don't really question the idea of public land anymore. But yeah, historically people have thought about how are we going to privatize certain things, and it's a very difficult challenge that I think legal scholars should be able to solve it with time. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.